In this episode, we're going to go over a PHP program that is used as a form handler. That is a program that is sitting on a server and it will receive the inputs that are submitted via a form. Let's take a look at an example form that we're going to be using throughout this presentation. And let's just remember that we have some text and text boxes over here arranged in a very particular way. We have a checkbox, we have a drop-down list, and we have a few radio buttons. This form is generated by this code here. It's all HTML, and the important part that we're going to need here is the form section. So there is a form tag which indicates in the action part that the handler program for this form, i.e. the program that will receive the data of the form and will process them, will be this one. Obviously, because there is no path before this file name, it is assumed that this form handler is sitting at the same location where the HTML code that generates this form also resides. By the way, we also need to note that the method for transferring the data used by this form is the post method. Usually it is either post or get. In this case, post is used. Then we have a couple of input elements. Recall that we have these text boxes here where the user can enter information. And in order to maintain this arrangement where the text and the text boxes are aligned and the alignment is maintained, a table is used. There is this table right here. This is the table, all right? And as you see, the table data that define the cells to be used are containing the text to be rendered, and then the next cell contains the form element. That is what maintains this arrangement. Then in the new row, you have another cell that contains the text to be rendered. And then in a new cell, you have the text box again. So we have three text boxes, one here, and then one here, and then one over here. What we need to remember, which is going to be important, is that the name of the first one is fname. The name of the second one is LST name for last name. And the name of the third one is phone. These names later are going to become variables in our program. And those variables are going to have exactly these names. And of course, whatever the user has provided as input will be the values for these variables, as we're going to see. We have a checkbox right here. The checkbox has a preset value to OK to list, and it's either checked or unchecked by the user. If it is checked by the user, then this key will be submitted to the server associated with this value. And if it's not selected, if it's not checked, then it will not be submitted at all. Then we have a drop-down list over here. The name of the drop-down list is season. So a variable by the name season is going to make its way in our program later. And these various options that can be selected would be the potential values for that variable, as we're going to see. We also have some radio buttons. Here's one. This one associates the key favorite color with the value blue. There is another one over here. As you see, it has the exact same name, but it has different value. And then there's two more, this one that has the exact same name again and associates the value red with the key favorite color, and the fourth one over here with the fuchsia. And of course then we have the submit button that has also some style information included in it. So the whole input that generates the submit button will be this one over here, and this is where the form ends. All right, so enough with the form. Just remember that the form looks like this, and then let's look at the handler. This will be our PHP handler. Recall that PHP is scripting that is embedded in HTML documents. And so what we have here is basically HTML, and then embedded in it, there will be some PHP snippets of code. So over here we have HTML again, and then PHP again. Our purpose is to go over the PHP and see how PHP is going to be handling the form. And that example is our purpose here now. The very first thing that is happening on this handler is to invoke this function, extract, on the variable post. Now, let's go over a few things here. First, whenever the form is submitted, then all the inputs that appear on the form are packed into a structure that is called the query string to be sent over to the server and, of course, the program handler. Now, if we look again at the form, then you see that we have these inputs with the various names that they have. These names are also referred to as keys. And when the user puts information in those keys, let's say in this way, then all of these inputs from the user will become values associated with these keys. So when the user submits this form, then all this information that the user has entered will be packed into a structure that is known as the query string. A query string looks something like this. It's usually packed like this. So you have key and value pairs like this, another key and value pair, another key and value pair, and so on. And key value pairs, they're delimited by ampersands, like this. And in this way, all of the names of the elements, the so-called keys, and their associated values, which is what the user has entered, are packed in this way to be sent over to the server and the handler program. All this information goes into a hash that has this default name variable underscore post. Now this is because the submit method was set to post for the form. So if you look at the form again, the method was post. If the method was get, then another hash array would contain all this information, which would be the corresponding get. For now, all this information exists in this hash. Another name for a hash would be an associative array. And if it sounds like I'm speaking Greek here, then maybe we would need to review the concept of hashes or associative arrays. But assuming that you can pause and look into it if you need to, we'll go on and we'll assume that we understand that all these key value pairs are in this associative array, and the extract function, what it will do is it will create new variables for the program that will have the exact names as the keys or the names of the elements in the form, and the values of them will be exactly what the user entered. In essence, what the extract does, it breaks up the query string into the key value pairs, and then it's using each key value pair to create a variable and associate it with the value that the user entered. So with this form now, all of the names that we had in the form make sense. Like for example, look at this variable here. This is the first time this variable is encountered, and it does have a value, and the value of it is whatever the user entered for the field phone in the original form. Also, later on we're going to see that there is an F name over here, and there is the sweepstake, and then there is a bunch of other variables as they were used in the form, and they all have values which are whatever the user had entered in the corresponding fields. Now, these are comments, obviously, so all of these lines don't matter, they're just information for our readability of the program, but otherwise they're not executable code. Here we have an if statement. So if this if statement succeeds, then this block from here to here is going to be executed. What exactly is the test for this if statement? This one here means not, if this is not true. This one, the preg match function, is using two arguments. The first argument is going to be a regular expression, and of course it's going to be given as a string, but it has to be enclosed into these forward slashes, because otherwise it will not be viewed as a regular expression. And then you have this variable over here. In short, what is happening here is there is an attempt to match the value of the phone variable, or the phone field as entered by the user, to this regular expression. What is happening is it's trying to check if it has a very specific form. If we look at the expression, this one will match the beginning of the string. Here we have a parenthesis, and it is backslashed because what we want is the actual parenthesis character, the left parenthesis character. Recall that in regular expressions the parentheses are used for grouping, and therefore they're not exactly used as characters to be matched. But when we want to match them as characters, as specific characters, then we have to backslash them. That's why this one is backslashed. There is another one over here which is backslashed exactly because we want the character right parenthesis. We do not want to indicate grouping. This one indicates a range of the characters of the numbers, of the number characters from 0 through 9, and the 3 in these brackets over here indicate that this has to happen 3 times. So we need to have within parentheses at the beginning of the string, we need to have 3 characters from the numeric ranges 0 through 9. Then we must have another 3 characters in the range 0 through 9. Then we must have a dash, and then we need another 4 numbers in the range 0 through 9. And this one here, the $, within a regular expression, indicates the end position of the string. So it has to match not any particular character, but it has to match the end position of the string. So since this has to match the string from the beginning to end, that means that the entire string has got to have this format. So if the phone does have this format, then we have compliance. Now, if we do not have a matching, if we do not have compliance of the phone against this form of string, then what's going to happen is this. Let's see them one by one. First, there is a print statement that starts printing a string. Notice that this one indicates the beginning of the string that will be printed. There is another quote over here, and this one is backslashed. The reason it is backslashed is because we do not want this to be perceived as closing this quote. We want a quote to be printed. That's why it is backslashed. Similarly, for this one, and for this one, and for this one, because as you see, there's a lot of HTML over here that is being printed, and then this quote matches this quote right here. So the string to be printed will be from here to here. And if you look at it closely, all it is HTML. Now, why does HTML appear like this over here, but then over here it has to be printed as a string? The reason is that this is outside PHP. Okay, this is outside PHP, but this one is within PHP code. See, the PHP tag has opened here and it's closing over here. So this indicates that all of this is going to be a PHP script. So if this existed here without the print function, then the interpreter would think that this is code, PHP code, to be executed, and of course it would not understand it. It would not be possible to execute it, so the program would crash. So that's why over here we need a print statement to print out all this HTML, because we are within PHP code, within the boundaries of PHP script. Whereas if you go outside that, then you have more HTML like this, which is used without any need to use a print statement. All right. This function over here, what it will do is it will terminate the script. It will terminate the script's execution because there is no point to go on further down, because it has been found that the phone is not in a right format. So this message is printed. This message is printed. And then once the message is printed, the script terminates. One thing to note regarding the phone and the regular expression that handles it, if this is not right, say for example, we go over here and we take out this parenthesis and then we try to submit. Okay, so see what happens here? The phone number does not match the form that we expect as described by the regular expression. So what the program does is it prints this message and quits, exactly as indicated over here, where if the regular expression does not match the phone, then print in red color and pretty big font size, print this yelling message, invalid phone number, and then the message that it has to be following this form and that you can go back and resubmit. So if we did go back and we put back the parenthesis, but this time we put something else, say this one, or take out the parenthesis and put something like this, okay, then again we're going to have no much. There you go. And only if we provide a form that is like this, of course, doesn't have to be exactly like that. I can go and put other numbers over here, so long as the numbers match the number of digits that we expect, then it will be fine. Now, assuming that everything is okay here and the phone does comply to the expected form, the program will go on, then more HTML will be transferred over to the browser, and then more PHP will be encountered and executed right here. So what do we have here? There is a check with an if statement that checks this condition. If the sweepstake is not okay to list, then execute this statement right here, which is what? Simply saying it print do not. Now let's take a look at this for a moment. Let's go back to the form and see how we have filled the form like this and then submit it and see what happens. Okay, take a look at this. It says you indicated that you like sweepstakes. That's because we checked this checkbox right here on like sweepstakes. So it says you indicate that you like sweepstakes. Now if I went back and I unchecked this and I submitted the form again, now notice what's going on here. It says do not like sweepstakes. Again, we check this, we get you like sweepstakes. We uncheck this, we get do not like sweepstakes. Let's go back to our code and see what happens here. This is going to be the variable that was created because of the checkbox that existed in our original form. So if we look at the original form over here, you see there is this input whose name is sweepstake and the value is okay to list. Recall that since this is a checkbox, if it is checked, then this will be submitted, this key value pair will be submitted to the server, and if it's not checked, then it will not be submitted. So what happens is, if it was checked, then this variable will have been created by the extract method that we saw earlier, this one, and it will be carrying the value okay to list. So if this was checked, then this test will fail because it says it is not okay to list. Okay, it will fail. If it fails, then this is not going to happen. It is not going to print the do not in bold. But if the sweepstake was not checked, then the sweepstake key would never have been submitted to the program. So this one over here is referring to a variable that did not exist. So on first use, it would have been created and it would have been empty. So in that case, this test would succeed because if this one is just created and it is empty, then it is not set to value OK to list. Therefore, this will then happen. This will be printed. So the do not text will be printed in bold. Okay, it will be printed in bold. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. All right, this printed in bold. And that's exactly because the checkbox was checked. All right, so we have some code here that depending on what action the user took, it will alter the text that is rendered to the browser. So after this has been done, this snippet of code here, that's what it does. And then after that is done, then HTML follows again, normally, as you see, until we get to this point where more PHP code follows. Now, the HTML over here prints a table. As you see, it prints a table with no border, so the table is going to be invisible, and it's going to have these as headers, first name, last name, and phone, with certain backgrounds set for the cells. These background colors seem to have red, green, and blue. This one will have the highest intensity of the red and the green, and a bit of lower intensity for the blue. So it's going to be a yellowish tone. This one has more blue, and this one has even more blue. So this is going to become, this is going to be going closer to white and faint it out. And as a matter of fact, you can see it. It's right here. The table is right here. And these are the cells that are generated with the background color from the code that you see over here. So this one basically starts the table, and then this PHP here, this PHP that script that starts here, is making sure that the variable names are actually printed. So the PHP code starts here and ends here. All right, it starts there and ends over there. And as you see, just table data elements, cells, in other words, are being created to display the values for these variables, name, last name, and phone, which are set by the extract that we saw up here to the values that the user had submitted. All right, so that's what this snippet of code is going to do. One interesting thing that you may wish to note, over here we are printing a stream. So this stream from this label to this label will be sent to the print as is. It's a very useful thing. You don't need to backslash anything because it will be streamed as is. Quotes and all of that will be there. We could have done the same thing up here, but no, we didn't. And we're just doing it over here just for the heck of it. All right. One thing to note is that this label has to be on a line on its own, by itself, with no spaces following or anything like that. Okay, so we printed the various elements for the text boxes provided by the user. And now what we're going to do is we're going to print all of the elements that existed in the form in another way. So notice over here that we're printing the values of variables, but we know the names of the variables. Okay, we're providing the names of the variables and we're asking a print statement to print them. This way, over here, it will print all of those key value elements, and it does not require us to know what kind of names were in fact used. Anything that was used will be printed. So let's see. We have a for each statement. For each what? For each element of the post hash. Now the elements of the post hash are key value pairs. Okay, so we need to provide variables to hold the values. So for each item of the post as key value pair, we want to print the statement for this key. You said, well, the user said, who submitted, the value was this. Okay, so the PHP that starts here and ends over here, this snippet. That's what it's going to do. It's going to print all the key value pairs. And then after each key value pair, it's going to print a break so that on HTML, on a browser, they will appear on different lines. So let's take a look at it. With what we submitted, here is the output of that snippet of code. For fname, you said Chris. For last name, you said this. And for phone, you said this. Season, you said this, and so on. All right, there is also one other alternative way, and the only reason that we're doing all this acrobatics is to give you just different perspectives of snippets of code that you can use, very useful tricks that you can use in PHP programming. So here's another alternative way to print data. So the use of the implode function. The implode function is the same as the join function of Perl. What it will do is it will take an array, it will take a collection of items, it has to be an array, and then, or a list, and then it will produce a string that strings up all these values, and it glues them together with whatever is provided as the first argument within this quotes. So all of the values in the post hash, they're going to be strung together. They're going to be glued by using this string as glue, and this string is going to be created. Again, this is a string. This has to be a list or an array. And then if we have this string prepared, then we can simply go and print it. Now, compare this with other languages, say in Java, where you want to print the elements of an array. Normally you would go into a for loop, and you would say from I goes from 0 to the maximum index of the array, then print me the item at index position I. And that has the side effect that you have to create this variable for the sole reason of being able to just go over the array. This one is a more elegant way of doing things, and I personally like it very much, so I figured it was worth the acrobatics that we're doing over here for just presenting it. Now, the next thing I want to do is to do some other operations that are typical of a server, and I would like to have the script open a file and dump all the data that the user provided into this file. So let's take a look at it. How would this happen? First, this function fopen for file open, it will create a handle, looks like a variable, but it's really called handle because it's not exactly like a common variable. It's a pointer to a file. So this one will be a handle that will be associated now with this file, which is opened for appending. That means that the contents of the file will not be lost, and whatever existed will still be there, will be at the end of the file, and if we write any more new stuff, it will go at the end of the file. You have to be careful because another flag that you can provide over here would be W, which stands for write. Now, the W means overwrite. It means that the previous data will be lost. And so if you open a file with a W, the moment that you execute the fopen, that file is wiped out and there is no way to get back its original contents. Now, notice this whole structure over here. File open or die with the message unable to open file. Now, the function die does take an argument which is going to be printed, it's going to be returned when the function executes. It will terminate the program and print this. But it will only be printed if you're running the program from command line. So if you go on the server and you run the program by typing PHP space program name, then this is going to be printed. But if you're running the program over a browser, then this is not going to be printed because it's mainly used for debugging. Now let's take a look at this OR. This is a logical OR. That means that one of the two arguments of the OR operator has to be true in order for the OR to be true. So if you have A or B, then either A must be true or B must be true or both. So the interpreter is going to try to evaluate this and see if this becomes true. It will try to do whatever it can to make this prove true. So what it will do, it will execute this first. If this does execute, then that will make this true. And so the interpreter will not try this one. Why? Because if the first argument is evaluated as true, then the OR is automatically fulfilled. And so there is no reason to go and try to evaluate any other arguments of the OR. But if this one, for some reason, it cannot happen, such as, for example, the file cannot be opened, then it will try to evaluate this one and see if it evaluates to true. And of course, that means that it will execute it and the program will die. So this is how this OR works. If this happens, fine, and if it doesn't, then this will happen. So assuming that we get past this without dying, then we come to this part where we go over the post hash. This time we're only looking at the values, not key value pairs. So as you see, we have for each outpost as value, then we have file write into my file, write this value, and add a new line to it. So once this for each, so once this for each loop executes, everything that was in the post array is a scratch. So once this for each loop executes, everything that was in the post hash will be dumped into the file. And then of course we have to close the file. This will destroy the handle and its association with the file, and it will make the file available for other programs to access. So this is where this script ends, and then the rest of it is just HTML again, which terminates the HTML file and is there for the sake of the browser. And that is the basic anatomy of this particular handler.